This week, let's do something a little different and check out a movie rather than a video game. Video game movies have traditionally gotten a bad reputation over the years, and I mean, they're not exactly drawing off Shakespearean material here. Honestly, I think if you're going into a movie based on a video game expecting the next incarnation of Citizen Kane, you're only doing yourself a disservice. Sometimes a movie can just be a fun action movie that makes zero sense and you switch your brain off, eat some popcorn, and have a good time for 90 minutes. And that's perfectly okay too. That being said, I'm actually a big fan of the original Mortal Kombat movie from 1995. I'll always have a soft spot for the original version, and I'd have to say it's my favorite movie based on a video game. Up to that point, all we really had to go off of for video game movies was such masterpieces as Double Dragon, Street Fighter, and Super Mario Bros. And we all know what a mesmerizing piece of filmmaking that was.
The name's Mario. I'm your main man. Ramadan, the can of Spain.
Some people complained about the PG-13 rating of Mortal Kombat and the watered-down finishers, but honestly, I didn't mind. I was just happy to see the movie. The characters were fun, Lyndon Ashby was hilarious and perfect as Johnny Cage.
Lou, I hate this place. I do. I'm telling you, I hate it. I'm in a hostile environment. I am completely unprepared. I'm surrounded by people who probably want to kick my ass. It's like being back in high school.
And the soundtrack was freaking awesome. Apparently, a lot of other people liked the Paul W.S. Anderson directed Mortal Kombat movie as well because it ended up grossing $124 million at the box office. So, they rushed out a sequel called Mortal Kombat Annihilation, which immediately killed off everybody's favorite character from the first movie, and, well, and after that, Mortal Kombat as a movie franchise just sort of fizzled out. They kept making games, sure, but any attempts to get a movie off the ground just never got very far. Robin Shou, the guy who played Liu Kang in the first two movies, had said that the initial contract that he signed was actually for 3 movies, but the studio had no interest in pursuing it further after the train wreck that was Annihilation. Every now and then there would be talk of an R-rated sequel or remake, but the closest we got to anything concrete was the 2010 fan film directed by Kevin Tancharoen called Mortal Kombat Rebirth that focused on the Jax and Sonya Blade characters. It presented a gritty, ultra-realistic take on the Mortal Kombat mythology with all the gore and violence you'd expect given the source material. It starred that guy from The Dark Knight as Jax and was well received by fans of the game, ultimately leading to a web series that ran for 2 seasons called Mortal Kombat Legacy, which focused on the backstory for a lot of the characters and acted as sort of a prequel to the original game. The series was generally well received by fans, but unfortunately that still just didn't build up enough momentum to get a movie off the ground. Well, fast forward to 2015, and after some futzing about with New Line Cinema being assimilated into Warner Brothers, someone decided to give the R-rated Mortal Kombat reboot a go. James Wan from the Saw and the Conjuring franchises signed on to produce, Greg Russo penned a script, and Simon McCoy signed on to make his directorial debut. And the end result was, well, a pretty damn good movie. I really liked some things, and I didn't like some other things. Okay, so full disclosure, I'm not even necessarily a huge Mortal Kombat fan at this stage in my gaming career, I guess you could call it. Played the games as a kid, but they just don't really hold my attention anymore as an adult. I respect the effort they put into modern fighting games, though, and how they try to push the envelope and try new and different things. But all that being said, I guess what I mean to say is that I'm not that much interested in whether or not the movie follows every little detail about the backstory and lore of the games. Just give me a good action movie with a reasonably close facsimile of most of the characters from the game, and let me watch them kick each other's asses for an hour and a half. Maybe have a laugh or two along the way, and I'm good. For the most part, this movie does that. As a side note, if you are interested in the backstory and the lore of Mortal Kombat, please check out my friend GamerThumb TV's Mortal Kombat Timeline series, where he gets really in-depth into the nitty-gritty of all of that backstory stuff with the lore and all the different characters of the games. They're very well made and very well researched as well. Anyway, for those that haven't seen it or haven't played the game, the plot of Mortal Kombat is pretty straightforward. Every generation, there's a tournament. A bunch of Earth warriors fight against a bunch of evil warriors from the Outworld. If the Outworld wins 10 tournaments in a row, they get to invade the Earth realm and take over. Well, they've won 9 in a row, so now we're on a collision course with wackiness. This reboot stars Louis Tan as Cole Young, an MMA fighter who inadvertently gets pulled into the tournament. The film centers mostly around Cole as well as Special Forces agents Sonya Blade, played by Jessica McNamee, and Jax, played by McCad Brooks. Josh Lawson plays Kano, a foul-mouthed mercenary with a past, and he is heavily featured in this story as well. In fact, you could pretty much argue that Lawson carries this movie on his back at times. You'll either love him or hate him depending on your brand of humor, but I thought he was hilarious.
Top knot. The end. What's his name? Kung Pao. Pass us a fucking egg roll, would you?
Let me put it to you this way. If you thought Jesse Ventura was funny in Predator, you'll like Kano a lot. Because you know, kids, everything doesn't always have to be politically correct all. Shin Han plays the main villain and instigator of the tournament, Shang Tsung. This was not my favorite casting choice. No offense to the guy, but he didn't come across nearly as menacing as Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa in the 1995 Mortal Kombat.
Your brother's soul is mine.
Well, I mean, this guy just seems like he's trying to convince everyone he's a soul-eating sorcerer from some other dimension. On a positive note, Sub-Zero has a lot of screen time in this one, and probably the most important arc to the story. If you were disappointed about how Sub-Zero and Scorpion were just sort of mindless drones in the original 1995 version, all I can say is I think you'll be mostly pleased with how their story is handled here. This movie can be a bit uneven. One minute it's a super serious epic samurai film, the next minute Kano and Cabal are cracking jokes and making me want a spin-off buddy movie with these two. The soundtrack is especially well done. They went with a more traditional orchestra score, although if you love the original Techno Syndrome piece from the 1995 movie, well, you'll be happy. Benjamin Wallfish did an excellent job with this score. Yeah, the first 10 minutes of this movie, which is set in the past, feels like some sort of incredible samurai movie. And we also get introduced to a really interesting and compelling character named Hanzo, who is trying to defend himself and his family from a bunch of deadly attackers. Then the movie cuts to modern day and Cole Young, a struggling MMA fighter who is trying to support his family and, So, okay, I felt like the kid that played Cole Young did a good job, but it was just such a boring and uncompelling character. We've done this whole story with the struggling MMA fighter in several other movies, and they did it a whole lot better. I've had some more time to think about this, and honestly, I wish they would have just skipped this guy altogether. I didn't hate him or anything, and it didn't even really bother me that much the first time I was watching it, but like I said at the beginning, this movie languished in development hell for decades. You finally get a chance to make the Mortal Kombat movie everybody wants to see, and you spend half the time on this guy? You've literally got a whole slew of colorful and interesting characters to choose from. I guess I didn't see why you needed to focus so much on some rando. You've already got a hard enough time trying to introduce us to the unique roster of characters that were actually in the games, so why waste screen time on someone completely new that frankly isn't all that interesting? To that end, some of the main characters, like Liu Kang, come off as a bit of an afterthought in this. He doesn't show up until about halfway through, and the kid that got to play him isn't nearly as convincing as Robin Shou from the original. And Johnny Cage isn't even in this. He exists somewhere in this movie's universe, but isn't really referenced until the end. So you swapped out Johnny Cage for this dude? The original movie was kind of smart in that it chose to take the Star Wars route and focus on three main characters, even though there's this whole big tournament going on with a bunch of other characters and all these other plots and stories. You get Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, and Sonya. Then you had Christopher Lambert snarking his way through as their mentor, Raiden, whereas this current movie is just sort of all over the place with its characters. And there's a whole subplot about how everybody gets their special powers that I felt like was just unnecessary. In the game, people could do over-the-top crazy stuff like shoot fireballs or whatever, and I guess they felt like they needed to explain the mechanics of that here by saying you had to find a way to unlock something called an arcana, but you could only get your arcana if you were chosen specifically for the tournament or you beat someone else that already has this special mark, and don't know, don't care. So those are my main complaints about this movie, but other than that, I did genuinely enjoy watching it. The blood-soaked fight scenes were over-the-top, goofy, nonsensical fun. It was cool to finally see the fatalities on the big screen. The soundtrack was excellent, and Kano was hilarious.
I also give really good foot massages.
Really, though, this felt more like a prequel to Mortal Kombat, if that's such a thing. The way the story pans out, this all takes place prior to the start of the big tournament from the original games, so I guess it looks like they're setting up a sequel, but none of that has actually been greenlit yet, to my knowledge, so who knows. Nevertheless, if you enjoy the Mortal Kombat games, or if you just like fighting movies in general, I think you'll be happy with Mortal Kombat. Now that I've had some time to think about it, I don't think it was better than the original, at least for me, but some of that is probably just misty-eyed nostalgia on my part, so your mileage may vary. I give Mortal Kombat 2021 2.5 out of 4 stars. Thank you for watching, please don't text and drive, and I'll see you next time on Friday Night Arcade.